to the unicameral, the only one of its kind,
And to Nebraska voters, the second house that keeps it grounded.
to the senators shaping workplace policy,
And the HR professionals living its impact every day.
to public service and civic responsibility.
To respectful dialogue and shared understanding.
Cheers to our public servants.
And cheers to HR.
Okay, so here we are ready to dive in. At HR Wine Bar, we use a simple framework to guide our conversations. We lean real hard into the wine metaphors. We do a wine tasting. So we look at it, we see it, we swirl it around, ask some hard questions, and then we do what we call a sniff test. We're going to smell it before we drink it. So we see what's happening. It's an observation. What's the current state of our world? Ask the hard questions in the swirl. And then we finally, that sniff test, we take real world scenarios and we ask, does this hold up? What would you do? What's actually working in theory versus practice? The goal isn't to be right, it's to have a candid conversation about how we wrestle with complex and really hard issues, and there's no better place to do that than in the unicameral.
So today we're recording live at HR Advocacy Day, a day that brings together HR professionals from across Nebraska to engage directly with policymakers. We're joined by Senator Tony Sorrentino, Vice Chair of the Business and Labor Committee. This conversation today is about understanding how the unicameral works, how employment policy is shaped, and how HR can serve as a trusted, nonpartisan resource through the legislative session.
Welcome, Senator Sorrentino. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Last year was our first HR Advocacy Day. It was under the moniker Day in the District. And you were, I'll tell you, the senator who spent the most time with us. I think you were with us for a good 45 minutes. You welcomed 4 HR people from Nebraska into your office. You talked about business and how things were going, specifically with balancing the budget last year. And I just wanted to give an extra thank you, not just for you being here today, but you know, not every senator did that for us last year. So it was special to spend that time with you, and we thank you for it.
Well, it was a pleasure, and I've just got a long background with HR, which I enjoyed.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Before I was in the legislature, I was first in public accounting, and then I went to law school, and somehow or another gravitated towards being an ERISA lawyer. So all things that have to do with retirement plans and mostly group health insurance. So typically in our practice, HR was the focus of who we spoke to. Mm-hmm. Now that's changed a little bit over the years as it got more and more expensive. Certainly HR is involved, but it's gotten to be a boardroom topic now because it's just one of the second or third largest expense items on a P&L. So I had a lot of exposures to HR and the other side of it as far as being not the financial focus, but just issues that face HR every day. I do not envy you whatsoever.
I think most of us, as we go and visit with the senators today, would say exactly the same thing about about our senators. We do not envy you. It's a heavy lift to get through 700, 800 bills in a long session, and I would guess you anticipate 400 to 500 this session?
I think maybe more than that.
Wow. Okay.
So it will be a grind, and I think we'll probably we've had a little delay to get started here. We're I think day 7 today, so we're down to 53 days, and haven't heard a lot of bills. We're probably going to finally hit the ground running, I would think, tomorrow and get going, and then of course we have a long weekend, so we'll be a little bit behind the 8 ball again, but. Mm-hmm. I'm hoping we get moving. You mentioned deficit. We somehow have one of those again this year. I think I listened to 2.5 hours of budget today, and the governor gave his state of the state and addressed a lot of that. So it's going to be interesting.
Yes, and we all have more work to do when we're driving home tonight is to listen to the state of the state, because we did not plan for these two events to happen on the same day. So you've got homework, friends out there. Can you talk to us a little bit about the impetus for bringing bills? How do issues get raised with our senators? How do you discern which things are worthy of your attention, right? And I would imagine some things kind of arrive on your desk somewhat formed, if not fully formed. And so
Some.
can you walk us through that process and
Sure.
how it gets into committee, like from start to committee?
Sure. I think I'd start with, as of just a year ago, I've just finished my first term in my second year. There used to be no limitation on the number of bills a senator could bring. You could bring 100 bills. That was cut to 20, and my understanding is I wasn't in the legislature then, but that was very controversial because there were senators who were bringing 70 and 80 bills. But when you think about that, and I'll talk about the process a little bit, I mean, you're lucky to really hear a couple of hundred. But the way it starts is it may be an idea from a senator coming in. I certainly had a couple things I wanted to focus on and did, and I have a couple things I want to focus on this year, and I will. But that's usually just 2 or 3, typically either pet interests or something that you're knowledgeable about from maybe what you did for a living before you did this. After that, there's a laundry list of things that the lobbyists who represent various businesses are looking for senators to take. So I found out the first year you can come to day one and think, oh, I've got my 6 bills and I'm good. And then the next 10 days, you have nothing but lobbyist after lobbyist after lobbyist wants to take your bill. And some are good and some are not. And some are good, but you say no because it might be in conflict with something either you believe or you're bringing a different bill. I think we have 3 more days where we can bring bills. And I can tell you the senators typically sigh a breath of relief because, okay, nobody's going to come and ask me to take more bills. I can't tell you exactly how many bills, but there is a lot. There's probably more than we're going to hear for 60 days. I only have 7, which doesn't sound like a lot, but if they're the right 7, it's a lot. And I've got a couple that will be very contentious. But you have I have a bill, you work with bill drafters, who I don't know how they do their job. I mean, they have to do 90% of their work in about 2 weeks, and it's crazy right now. But you'll get that bill, and you'll submit it in the first 10 days of the legislature. So we've got 3 left. And at some point in time, those bills will go to the executive board. And the executive board is made up of, I believe it's 8 senators elected from the 3 congressional districts. And they decide what committee will hear those. So, for instance, if I have a bill to raise taxes, that'll go to the Revenue Committee. And I'm on the Revenue Committee, the Business and Labor Committee, the Urban Affairs Committee, and the Retirement Committee. I think I'm the only one with 4. I don't know how I got so lucky.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you very much. And they will decide what committee is going to hear it. And that's where we're at right now. The bills are just getting referenced, it's called, to a committee. And then every committee, I happen to be on committees 5 days a week, we will hear those bills, and then that committee will vote to decide whether or not they should go to the floor for general file. And sometimes that's real easy. It's a slam dunk. If you have all 7 or 8 senators on your committee agree with it, it can go to consent file. A consent file, it's the quickest way to the floor. And typically, if it's a consent file, it doesn't get a lot of discussion. But there's 3 levels. You have to pass general, select, and final. And some bills will get to the floor and fail miserably, and some will get there and you can get out in just a matter of a couple days. The real work happens in the committees. And we really ask the chairman or chairwomen of those committees to do the work there. If it's a bad bill, kill it there. Don't bring it out to the floor, and we're going to debate it, 3 times or 2 times or 1 time, and just take up time because technically we're a part-time legislature, and that we only meet 90 days a year or 60 days a year. So once it gets to the floor, it'll be debated, and you would think that sounds straightforward, but it really doesn't. The senator gets to open for 10 minutes, and he can or she can answer questions, and then people will testify. Other senators will. The real testifying happens in the committees. You call in your experts and try to convince people one way or another. But once it gets to the floor, if you can get 25 out of 49, you would think your bill would move along. Sadly, that's not the case anymore. Many, many, many bills are contested either along politics or party lines, and you almost have to have 33, which is a plurality to not get your bill filibustered. And certainly not every bill gets filibustered, but I wouldn't say the important ones, but I would say the controversial ones do. And if you can't get 33, that general hearing could go 8 hours, 8 hours of actual debate. And if it gets through that and gets select, it could go another 4 hours. And if it gets through that, it can go 2 more hours on final. So everything gets 3 hearings, which is great. It's purely vetted, and rarely do we end up with a bill that we all looked at really hard and the Attorney General says, oh, that's unconstitutional. We've already gone past that. So bills are vetted well, but oh my gosh, if you can imagine, that's 14 hours of potential debate on 1,000 bills. We don't have 14,000 hours. So kill it in the committee is really where you want to do the work, or pass it along. But that's generally, and then of course it goes to the governor, and he could sign it or he could veto it. And if he comes back with a veto, we could override that veto. I haven't been a part of a veto yet.
Okay.
That's a real short explanation, isn't it?
That's a fantastic. Well, it was concise. It gave us all the information without a lot of extra words. And as we've had a couple speakers this morning, a lot of us in HR like words.
I like numbers.
Right.
Positive numbers.
We in HR need to do a better job of getting into the numbers. And so Jamie and I are going to have a conversation about that on some other podcast episodes very soon. So one of the things that I'd like to circle back on to connect with our audience today is you mentioned lobbyists. So essentially, we are not paid lobbyists. We're all volunteers. We volunteer for our local HR chapters across the state to put on professional development. And this advocacy experience that we're having right now, we're also, behind catching up on bills and doing those things in order to be effective in our meetings today. But can you talk to us a little bit about, well, I would hope you would say it's important for us to do this work, but can you talk about the difference between kind of paid lobbying and us as volunteers coming together today? Is that experience different for you?
Well, I'll talk about lobbyists in general first. Not all senators will say this. I appreciate lobbyists. There is no way, and if a senator tells you they did, you cannot read 850 bills. I mean, some of them were passed literally, or brought up to the clerk to be referenced, 3 days ago. And we have bills that are 200 pages long. We have bills that are 1 page long. So you do need to rely on people who have subject matter expertise. If I have a bill coming up to me and it's on agriculture, I've driven by a farm, and that's as close as I've gotten. I know nothing about ag, and jokingly, I've been called Senator Ag, yeah, right. But whether paid or unpaid, they're a source of knowledge. And I know some people say, they're twisting arms and they're giving you one side of the story. Hopefully the senators are smart enough to know that if there's one side of the story, there's another. And I make it a practice to ask a paid lobbyist particularly, okay, I get what you're saying. I understand it. I have some questions. My last question to them is, okay, tell me what the other lobbyist is going to say. I want to know, because when I go to that lobbyist, they're probably going to tell me that. As long as lobbyists are truthful, I think they're great. And there's very few that aren't. They know their business, and you can't really tell lies. But I think they're a great resource. As far as the volunteer lobbyists, better yet, that's not their job. They're there because they have a passion, and they have the equal amount of information. But there's something about doing this on your own, and I appreciate that. I probably visit with more volunteer lobbyists than I do paid lobbyists. But I would say lobbyists in general, it doesn't have a popular ring to it, but I appreciate it. It's very useful.
Excellent. Thank you for that.
Right.
Yeah.
But by the way, Senator Sorrentino just called us all passionate. So
There you go.
I hope you heard that.
Yeah.
That's not something HR gets called very often. We get called a lot of things.
I never called them that in my prior life.
Got it. You called them clients.
Yeah, clients. Right.
Mm-hmm. Well, and today is so much focused on, there's a lot of education we're doing, right? The things you're sharing with us are going to help us to strengthen our understanding of how we can better present that information to you as a legislator. What information do you feel is most important that you rely on from those that are volunteer, passionate professionals like us coming to you?
Sadly, there's this thing called a fiscal note. And when you're $491 million at deficit to start with, and somebody brings you a great idea, and then you turn to page 4 and it says, well, this cost state $300 million. It doesn't get very far. So there's some really good things that do cost state money, and that's great. But you just have to know the room. I mean, if the room is saying, oh my gosh, we can't spend anything, we're cutting everything, probably not a good time to bring that. But on the other hand, it's good to bring it because it's awareness. Very rarely does a good idea become a law on the first try. I'm finding it out. I'm bringing a bill and so, that's the 8th time that's been brought. Yeah, but maybe 8th is the one that passes. And we had one of those last year regarding 529 plans that you can have for your children. And of course, here's a good pun. We were trumped by the OBB, but it kind of did it on its own. But we passed it first, where you could use those funds for grade school and high school. Now, granted, it doesn't take effect till 2029 because of the deficit situation we're in. But a bill like that, I think I was the 8th one to bring it. So it took a long time, and I think there's only 2 more states left. So, bring it on. And if it doesn't fit now, maybe it'll fit later.
Absolutely. That's so important, and appreciate your openness to varying perspectives as well. Circling back to the committees, and once a bill gets into committee, what that looks like. Obviously, as HR professionals, we have probably a good interest in the Business and Labor Committee that you sit on as well. And can you explain a little bit the role and the scope of that committee?
Okay, that is one of, I'm going to get this, I think it's about 14 committees altogether. I could be off by one. And there's talk about merging a couple of 2 going forward, but that won't be till at least next session. But a committee, this is where the real work is. Now, we each get a copy of the bill. Hopefully, by the time we've gotten a copy of the bill, we've done our homework, and either lobbyists have reached out to us or we've reached out to them. We have research that is available. Every senator has an administrative assistant and a legislative assistant. The legislative assistant is really key to the senator. Here's been the history of the bill. It's been brought 2 or 3 times. Here's you can expect to be people that might be against it. Here are the people who might be for it. Maybe we could talk about the fiscal note. And when we get into that committee, let's say it's 8 people, it's typically, okay, everybody's read the bill, let's discuss it. And at that point in time, we'll try to draw some consensus as to whether or not as a committee we think it will survive on the floor. It could be the greatest bill in the world, and we know we have no chance. That's where you've got to say no. And that really relies on the chair. I'm not a chair of anything. I'm in my second year. I'm a vice chair of a couple things. The chairs generally, it is such an important job. It's not a title. That person has enough power to say, we've seen this bill. I'm not even going to discuss it in committee. I'm going to set it aside. We've got other bills that we want to talk about. That committee person can also say, I, as a committee chair, have 2 bills that can come out of my committee. And if somebody isn't out there to prioritize that bill, I could group some bills in this committee into basically the same kind of topic. It's got to be relevant, and bring this out as a committee bill. And then he or she will talk on the floor about why they did that. That's another way to get similar bills together. I can't even stress how much the committees are worth, which is why, for instance, right now we're meeting 2 hours a day. And starting next Monday, or next Tuesday, because we're off Monday, the committee meetings will start. And those are 5 days a week, and they convene at 1:30, and depending on what you're on, you might go till 10 o'clock at night. Legislative does all the time. HHS does. We in Revenue, typically not that late. The last time I saw, right now, Judiciary Committee has like 140 bills already, and there's some committees that have 10. So vetting the bill is where that happens, and that's so important.
Absolutely. And as you talk through that, vetting the bill, and you mentioned, voices that may support, voices that might oppose, where can, in those workforce-related bills, HR come in as a partner? And what's the right time for that? And how can we be proactive in that, partnering with you versus a reactive voice after it's, gone down the line?
I don't think it's ever too early. I like to know about the bill, and if I can, talk to as many folks with information, before we even start in our committee. Because if I don't know the information on the committee, by the time you get to the floor, it's too late. Because in the committee, we're going to vote it out, hopefully to the floor, but that's where your subject matter experts, you guys come in and testify. By show of hands, I know you can't see around. Has anybody ever testified in front of a committee? I don't see any hands. It's not all that difficult. We do not challenge you like we challenge the other senators. Nobody's asking mean questions. Nobody's pointing fingers. We're just asking for information. And the more information, the better. There's opponents. We'll have those people. First we'll have the proponents, then the opponents. And you can even testify as neutral. And it's really, really helpful because if the topic is, whether or not we do or don't let lottery tickets be sold at a kiosk, I've never bought a lottery ticket in my life. I probably shouldn't because I'm not lucky anyway, so I have never done it. But I don't know anything about that. I mean, you could tell me that lines at Hy-Vee are 2 blocks long, and I'd believe it. I don't know. Please, if you have the opportunity to testify, or if you have something you can bring to the party, or it affects your employer, please testify. There are some really important bills where we only have 2 or 3 people testifying. And so we need your help, too.
Wonderful. We'll add that to next year's agenda of
Right.
how to testify.
Right.
We have come to the point in our podcast today for the sniff test. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy to bring our advocacy edition today.
Okay, so once again, our sniff test is where we propose possible scenarios that have to do with our topic for the day, and then we just get your perspective and we chat. So it's a little bit of a scripted read here, but we have scenario number 1. A proposed bill is introduced with a clear positive goal. On the surface, it sounds reasonable and easy to support. It aims to improve fairness, protection, or clarity for workers. As HR professionals dig into the details, concerns surface, if everyone's thinking of LB 415 from last year. The bill introduces new documentation requirements, timelines, or reporting steps that don't align well with existing systems. Compliance would require added tracking, manual workarounds, or changes to payroll benefits or scheduling processes, creating additional administrative burden, especially for small and mid-sized employers. The intent is solid, but the implementation creates friction. So HR is left asking whether this will truly improve outcomes for employees or whether it will divert time and resources away from the people it's meant to support. So the question for Senator Sorrentino is, does this bill pass the sniff test when you consider how it would actually be implemented in real workplaces?
Well, I'm on the Agricultural Committee, so I pass.
You're
Not
here
gonna
on
believe
behalf
that?
of business and
No, not
labor,
on the
sir.
Agricultural
Choose as many as, sir.
I would say this. I mean, of the 49 senators, and I don't profess to know every one of their backgrounds. I know them all. And there is a fairly small percentage of the senators right now who are either business owners or ran businesses that would probably think about that. And that's, I'm fortunate because I was in the business community for a long time. It does get airtime, and it's really important at the committee level, especially business and labor, that you have business-oriented people on there to ask those questions. And I can tell you, on that committee, we're really well staffed. I think there might only be 1 or 2 committee members that really have never either business owners. I consider it implementation. You can pass all the great, laws in the world, but if you can't implement them or they're too expensive to implement, we run into this on the government side today. Implementing things that would make the government run more smooth, more flexible by eliminating step by step. And then we find out that while our intent was good, the implementation is awful. And we'd probably be better off leaving them alone. I am a huge proponent of vetting. I want to start, here's the law, here's where we want to end up. What does it take to get there? And if it's going to be a human resource nightmare, this is where we didn't talk about this, but the amendment process. Amendments are typically talked about during committee level, but offered on the floor. And it's very rare that an important piece of legislation is introduced and somebody doesn't want to amend it. Now, there's something called an unfriendly amendment, and they're just trying to kill it. But typically, they're friendly amendments. That senator who introduced it can say, yeah, I think that's a great idea, or they can argue to it. Hopefully, the amendment process takes into consideration the implementation process. Not always. I've been involved in way too many tax bills that came out and said, okay, this is a great idea, and we're going to save $10 million and it costs $50 million to implement it. Something didn't happen during the implementation project. So I am aware of it. We try to get it. We do not get it right all the time. And there are some bills out there this year that fit that description.
Because we have some bills, for example, just brought up yesterday. I'm speaking specifically, and this is a brand new bill to me. 'Cause
I
it was
may not even
yesterday.
know which one you're talking
nope. 1059, 1009, and 1011. So there are three, and they all have to do with work comp changes, significant changes in the compensation wage, in timelines, in back pay to the waiting period, et cetera, et cetera. And I haven't even read them yet, but based on the information that I have, this would cause a major issue, not so much on the HR side, but on the expense side in the insurance industry, right? We can count on our mod rates going up, we can count on our premiums going up, and we can count on the industry to leverage this type of a change to additionally increase prices just because they have an administrative burden that they also have to implement. And so how, when we are concerned about a bill, again, a bill that we haven't read, how can we best communicate that in these one-on-one meetings we're about to have this afternoon, what is going to have the most resonance with our senators as we meet with them?
And I have not read those bills. It sounds like they would be bills that might go to banking and insurance. I'm not sure.
Okay.
It could go to business and labor. Depends on the reference. If I were in your shoes, as soon as read the bill, as soon as it's referenced and you know what committee it's going to, you reach out to the chair and you say, we have a position on these bills and we want to contact some or all. There's been people who have come to the committee as a whole and called a meeting and say, hey, we're going to have a meeting at 7:30 in the morning. We want to talk about this. Or if you have enough number of you, there's this little thing called this glass door when you're in that unicameral, and you pass little notes in, and you drag them out one by one into the rotunda, and there's mornings where I'll get 10 or 15 notes, some not so many, and you talk to them one-on-one, and you ask them what their position is, or a lot of times you're educating them on the bill. I hate to admit this, but there are times when senators are voting on a bill that they've had about 2 minutes to look at it. It's just too much in such a small time. But I would start at the committee level, get the name of those committee members and reach out to every single one of them. And you can't bug them too much because they'll tell you they'll go away. And most senators are very direct. Look, I'm for this bill. So if you're against it, I understand, but I don't want to waste your time. You want to waste mine because I'm going with this bill. That's what I would do.
Okay, great feedback. Appreciate that. Okay, well, let's move on to scenario number 2. We will keep all of those things in mind this afternoon, and we have a note to track all of those bills to follow up with the committee.
Exactly.
All right. Scenario number 2, a workforce issue begins surfacing in one region or legislative district that isn't showing up statewide. This is one of the things we have in Nebraska. We have a large rural population and then 2 very concentrated metropolitan areas, and so some of those things don't translate, across the state. It could involve labor availability, which is a major issue we've discussed this morning, transportation challenges, housing shortages, we talked about that this morning, child care access, number 304, we've talked about that this morning. From HR's perspective, the issue is real and urgent, but it doesn't always translate cleanly into statewide data or broad policy language. There's concern that if it isn't surfaced quickly and clearly, it may be overlooked in the legislative discussions that rely on generalized trends rather than local realities. So HR has to decide how to raise the issue in a way that's timely, credible, and actionable without overstating the problem or waiting until it becomes a crisis. What's the safest and most, not safest, my eyes were going,
Safest?
my mouth was going faster than my eyes, imagine that. What is the fastest and most effective way for HR to surface these kind of district-specific workforce issues so that they're heard and understood?
Oftentimes on the floor, sometimes in committee too, we will get, the pages will pass around information that's specific to a topic that it's been initialed by the introducing senator typically, or some senator. And given the fact that most bills on the floor take 20, 30 minutes at least, it's very helpful to have local specific information. I can tell you I'm bringing a bill that will not be popular. Gee, there's a shock. Nothing I've ever brought has been popular. Some people are going to call it a cigarette tax. And it is. But I have a new name for it. It's called the Medicaid reimbursement bill, because there's a logical link between, allegedly, and I don't have the numbers, but anytime this has been brought up before, they said, oh, this is a tax on the poor because only poor people smoke. Well, that's, of course, not true, but there are a lot of people who are poor who smoke. So we'll go by that. But we also have this little problem in the state legislature that we have to fund something called state Medicaid. And a logical presumption is if you truly are poor, that's what Medicaid's for. We need Medicaid. So if you smoke, you're probably on Medicaid. Well, the accountant comes into me and says, wait a minute, we have a revenue and we have an expense. Let's match them. If smoking is causing $151 million of Medicaid a year, just lung cancer due to smoking, maybe the best place to find the revenue to pay for that might be an additional tax on that. If you don't smoke, you don't pay it. Unlike property taxes, if you live, you're paying property taxes, right? Or if you live somewhere. So I will introduce this, and there'll be all kinds of rocks thrown at me, and that's fine. How do you think I got a face like this? So they will find some reason, but it's really important in that case for me to get local data. Smoking data is not the same in Kimball, Nebraska as it is in Elkhorn, Nebraska, believe it or not. There's a lot of different behavioral interests, and I need to know that because I don't represent just Elkhorn and Waterloo. I represent Nebraska. Now, sometimes your constituents will say, no, you represent us. I am your voice, but I represent Nebraska. So my bill, I will say, is good for Nebraska. It may not be good for somebody who smokes. But if you read the bill carefully, the dollar is going right to Medicaid. So what does that do? That frees up general funds, because general funds is what we pay Medicaid out of, right? If we have more Medicaid funds or we have more general funds, that could lead to things like, keywords, property tax relief. So the only reason I'm not saying add the tax and throw it into general fund is because I don't have any control over what goes out of the general fund. I have a little more control if it goes right to Medicaid. And I think you're going to see this as a new strategy. People targeting things and saying, yeah, the general fund, it's a lot of money and it's a big deal, but 49 senators are trying to get their hands on that. I only want one to go there. So information that's very specific and very local is very helpful to me.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so scenario 3. A legislator reaches out to HR professionals during a session because the bill is moving quickly and they need a workforce perspective and input. HR provides feedback, shares concerns, the conversation is productive. But once the session ends, communication slows down, legislators go back to their regularly scheduled programming, and the relationship kind of goes quiet, right? Months later, a new issue emerges that affects employers and employees, and HR realizes there's no clear path to re-engage, okay? The connection existed, but it wasn't sustained, so HR is left wondering how to move from being a reactive voice in these moments of urgency to a trusted, ongoing resource for legislators for those committee hearings. And so the challenge isn't necessarily access, it's continuity. So the question is, how can we shift from being a one-time contact to being an ongoing resource that has name recognition for our senators and that you think top of mind when an employment-related issue comes up? I need to reach out to somebody from HR Advocacy Day.
That is a great question, and it's a really easy one for me because I think people believe, especially we had a fairly short break. We'll have a long break now, April 17th at 5 p.m. to be exact. But from that time until January 7th of next year, that's when the relationships get built. I probably met far more times with both volunteer and professional lobbyists in those 7 months than I ever did. During the session, you have no time. Mm-hmm. But if you need something during time, every senator has a legislative assistant and of different categories, but they're key in rattling the cage of the senator. You need to get back to this person. If you're trying to get to the senator, you're never going to get to him. But the legislative assistant, but even if it's just getting together, for lunch or coffee or something, I'm more relaxed, you're more relaxed. I don't have to worry about a bill I've got to bring in 2 hours. I've made, my last year was my first year, and those first 4 weeks, I didn't even know who the lobbyists were. And now some of them, I have regularly scheduled appointments with them every 2 weeks in the summer. And that's how you build relationships. And it helps me too, because when I see a bill and I don't know anything about this, I can call that lobbyist. I mean, you're going to come to me, a bill on ethanol. I know which lobbyist to go to and which lobbyist is going to be against it, because you got to weigh both sides. So most senators are very well acquainted with lobbyists of both ways. And I will tell you, you make good friends and then you make enemies. Oh, I really wanted you to support that bill and you're on the other side. Yeah, but I was on your side the first 3 times. So, right. And they understand that. But it is somewhat cumbersome sometimes. I've got one of those coming up Friday night. So, yeah.
So that is a wonderful advertisement for all of our HR professionals across the state to stay engaged and to be reaching out. Just for my own clarification, because I don't know, do the legislative aides work through the year?
Yes, they do.
Okay, so we
now
still
they could have different hours.
Okay.
My office hours are 8 to 5 all year long.
Okay.
Some maybe not as much. In fact, most AA and LA are both there. They are full-time employees. They're supposed to work 2,080 hours, and like everybody else. But keep in mind, during the actual sessions, my LA can be there as late as I am.
Sure.
And starting March 1st, we'll start going into the evening. So we'll have 45 days of, 9, 10, 11 o'clock. We can't go past midnight, but they stay late.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
So consistency is key.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, repetitive.
Absolutely. Well, let's take a quick pause and let this breathe for a moment, and we'll be right back for our second pour. Welcome back. Let's move into a second pour and dig a little deeper. So in our second pour, I'd love to tell you you're off the hot seat, but you're not yet.
I'm just on the uncomfortable seat.
Yeah, it's getting a little bit more uncomfortable. So this is the part of the conversation where we like to turn it over to you, and we've talked about what we're seeing, what's swirling. We've run through a few scenarios and asked for your thoughts on that. And we'd like to ask some questions in addition that have come up to kind of keep a practical and focused perspective on how HR and our legislators can better work together. We talked a lot about building trust with these partnerships and being consistent and building that relationship through even contacting you now that we learned in the, so to speak, off season to really kind of engage. What part of the legislative process throughout that do you feel is most understood when you meet with constituents?
Most understood or misunderstood?
Misunderstood.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question, but going door to door just a year and a half ago now, I guess it seems like it was yesterday. The process itself is probably not as misunderstood as what our role is. And the role of a legislator in Nebraska is a little bit different. Well, it's a lot different than every other state. It is thought that we are full-time people, that we're there all year long. And we are, but just not in session. But most people probably get their news from national news, and they see the two houses and how they work, and bringing a bill in one place and getting it through all these steps. We're very simple. I mean, there's 49 people. That's it. It used to be, you get 25 people to agree something, you've got a law. Now it's probably 33, but it's what happens in the back. I mean, it's extreme. I am still learning, a year into this. We have a rule book that I challenge anybody to understand. It's very technical. And you learn that on the floor, if there are legislators that want to stop you, there are motions that they can file that will take priority to yours and stop you right in your tracks, even if you've got a good bill. And I don't think most people probably know that. I didn't know that, and I was running for office. It's like the old saying, if you saw how sausage was made, you probably wouldn't eat it. And that's a little bit how this is. It's complicated, but in my opinion, and a lot of people don't share this, it works. I hope we stay with the unicameral. There's talk about wanting to go to a bicameral. Some states have, 500 representatives and 100 senators. I can't imagine trying to get a bill passed with 600 people voting on it, because you're going to have 600 people with a different opinion. We have 49 different opinions as it is. And then if you throw in the governor's office, there's another one. So everybody, I would love to have everybody come down and watch for one day when we have a contentious bill. If you get a chance, you should do it. It's interesting.
Absolutely. And the takeaway I hear there is continual education of that process and talking to you as a human being as well, not just in your seat, to understand what you're also dealing with behind the scenes.
I spoke with a senator today who's in his last year of an 8-year term. And it's funny you asked this. He goes, I didn't know you could do that. Something happened this morning. 8 years, and he didn't know it. So I don't feel so bad that I didn't know it. There's a lot that goes on that is behind.
Yeah, you're like,
doors.
I'm doing great.
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
With that being said, and seeing the committees that you're on, business and labor, and obviously this group in particular concerned about workforce issues, we look at trends, we're looking at what's coming our way. What workforce issues do you see will still face Nebraska in 5 years from where you sit?
The one that I see most of, and it's getting a lot of press, everybody knows the cost of higher education is just going through the roof. Yet Nebraska hasn't changed all that much from what it was 25 or 30 years ago. We still need jobs that don't necessarily require a 4-year college degree. I happen to be on the board of trustees for Doane University, and we talk about this all the time at that level. In some cases, including some of the smaller universities, it's getting harder to attract more students. It's expensive. It's 4 years of lost opportunity costs, and I can go through an apprenticeship with a labor union and make just as much or more. And I agree. I live in an area, a very well-populated area of Omaha, that the trades and the people who are looking for they can't find trained people. And I went to Creighton University. I love Creighton University, but I didn't learn a thing about plumbing there. And we need those. So education is a big deal. The legislature acted a couple of years ago on behalf of the community colleges. And what they did is they took away levying power, because there was arguments back and forth, we want more money. And they just said, kind of, look, here's how much money we're going to put towards community colleges. And when it's gone, it's gone. And interestingly enough, I used to be on the Metro Community College Board as well. And when you have a certain finite budget, you deal with it. And I think Metro Community College in Omaha has over 21,000 students. It's almost as big as UNL. So I want to focus on not so much the higher education, but the needs of the workforce for the non-secondary education.
Absolutely. And we heard this morning from some of our speakers, those efforts that are in place, some
Right.
of the things out there to continue upskilling, reskilling.
I didn't even know this was coming, but in the governor's State of the State, if you listen to that, they are talking, he talks quite a bit about that. And I know of several colleges around the state that are going to 3-year bachelor degrees. And basically what they cut out is, and I could say this, I went to create the liberal arts part of it. If I'm going to be a welder, I probably don't need philosophy and theology, but I need some more technical courses. And the question was, for you, will employers accept 3-year baccalaureate degrees? That's on you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or do you really want a 4-year degree for no particular reason?
Well, my first response, thinking about the conversation you're having about funding and supporting colleges and community colleges, is that I think there has been a problem in our profession, and I'm going to call us out on it, in the last 40 years or so as higher education through Pell Grants and FAFSA and affordability and loans and those types of things. We have in HR used the 4-year degree as a filter in our pipeline to say, well, these folks have a 4-year degree, so we're going to bump them to the top. And so some of our job descriptions have become inflated for what's truly necessary to do the job. Yes, your top performer and your top candidate might have a 4-year degree, but it's not really a requirement of the job. And so we've started to see, even at the government level, I don't remember if Nebraska was in the indicated in the article that I read, but state governments are starting to remove 4-year degrees from the job descriptions that do not truly require that level of knowledge. And so it's been an interesting conversation hearing about the funding from the education side to the workforce development side to the HR side in really considering what is necessary in a position going forward, especially as education becomes so much more expensive. So
When we sold our business, we had about 250 employees. If I were back in that business now, I would remove the 4-year degree. I still need the same experience. But I was looking at smaller businesses, you don't have a lot of training staff. So you rely on hiring people from other companies. We hired from insurance companies, Mutual of Omaha, Blue Cross Blue Shield, Physicians Mutual. Those people were extremely well qualified, but yet on our job descriptions many times it would say, you have to have a 4-year degree. I would change that now.
Yeah.
But that was, a few years back.
It's also an argument for all of HR and for all of our companies to have a very robust training program to make sure that folks are upskilling, especially when we think about the fact that I think the statistic is 25% of the jobs that will exist in 2 decades do not exist now, right? And so we can't even train people for them now. We can't educate them for them now because we don't even know what they are. 10 years ago, we never would have dreamed that there would be a full-time generative AI prompt writer position. That's a thing, a full-time generative AI prompt writer. And so as we're thinking about these types of education and the ready access to information, right? And I have a doctorate. Okay, but if I want to go learn something new, I'm out on YouTube. Oh, I need to go figure out this VLOOKUP, right? I'm on YouTube to figure that out. I'm not going back to school to take a class on Excel. And so we all have more ready access to information and self-training. It's the worldwide library card to get the education.
Will the job as state senator exist in 25 years? I'm just curious.
That's a great question. That's a great question because as we are, Hunter Trainer from the Nebraska Chamber was in this morning, and he was talking about, the thought has escaped me, but he was talking about something, the workforce being balanced with technology, and how we're still going to need to trust those people up to do the jobs because they understand the industry. We're not going to go out and source somebody else who doesn't know the industry but knows the technology. We're going to take the person who knows the industry and teach them about the technology to retain all of that institutional knowledge. And so that upskilling piece is really important to be on the front side of that as HR. Some of our business owners and leadership and C-suite folks are thinking that far forward, but not all of them are. And so HR, it's up to us to get ahead of those workforce problems to prove our mettle, so to speak. But it's an interesting conversation with the funding and other things. So.
Finding the right balance.
Finding the right balance, and that is key. And the other thing, speaking of balance, when you were talking, Senator, about the importance of the committee chairs prioritizing the bills that are coming through, I was like, well, HR gets it. We do this every day. We're prioritizing candidates. We're prioritizing, handbooks and policies and what's going to take my attention today. And sometimes voters at large and sometimes lobbyists and business owners, sometimes we don't have the full picture. You individually as a senator don't have the full picture. So I'm going to say, yes, this job will still exist because you don't have the full picture. And in order to do government well, in order to do business well, in order to do HR well, you have to be willing to slow down and collaborate and have the hard conversations and build the relationships to get to better. We're never going to get to perfect, but we can get to better.
Absolutely. As we kind of talk about this past year, Amy and I did an episode on the podcast. We called it the Wild Wild West of HR because
yes,
this year
we
felt
did.
like we were just swinging the lasso around and seeing what was going to happen in terms of employment law changes and the things that put strain on us as HR professionals, organizations, the training that has to happen once those things are rolled out. When you think about that kind of relationship with employers and what we've been talking about today in building this relationship with HR professionals, is there any change you see on the employer side that could benefit both workers and businesses when it comes to relating with you?
Nothing comes to the top of my head right away. I will emphasize your senator is only as good as the people who can channel knowledge to them. We've got some really, really, really smart senators who, on 100 topics, have no idea what they're talking about. I think most appreciate all the input we can. I don't get tired of hearing from HR or anybody else that this law could impact their business, this law can impact their profitability or their retention of employees. I don't get tired of that at all. That doesn't necessarily mean I can vote that way or will vote that way, but it's still about information. And I know now a little secret on the floor, if you see senators holding their cell phones, they're not talking to their buddies, but it is so fast moving that we have to communicate who's in the queue. There, you line up to talk on the mic. Should I get in? Should I get out? When should we call the question? But that kind of communication has to exist between the voluntary lobbyists and the lobbyists. It moves too fast. It's a little bit like driving a race car all day long. But I will never complain when you come to me and want to talk about it. Please do.
Drive fast, turn
Drive
left.
fast.
Turn left.
Yeah.
Don't forget the turn left part.
It's like coaching track. When the gun goes off, keep turning left.
There you go. There you go. Okay, well, I think we're going to move into what we call our wine flight. A lot of what we deal with in HR exists on a spectrum. Folks think that HR is about being black and white. Nope. It's about the perfect shade of gray. So we're going to lean into our wine metaphor and have a wine flight where we talk about things from sweet to dry. As we're going in to talk with senators this afternoon, the sweet side is leading with intent and with a short human story about how their work affects you, boots on the ground, and explaining why the issue matters to you. The medium body is about adding context and describing how issues are showing up in real workplaces, what it takes to implement things like the Healthy Families Workplaces Act, which is the new name for LB 415. And then we finish dry by getting into the numbers that Senator Sorrentino likes, right? What are the numbers? What are the dots and squiggles? What's that financial implication of the thing that we're talking about? So make sure you cover the whole spectrum from sweet to dry, the personal to the dry and on paper when you're having those conversations. So that's our wine flight education moment for today. I want to give a round of applause and a thank you for Senator Sorrentino.
Thank you for being invited me. Thank you.
For visiting with us. We will be following up in the off season.
Yeah, we learned something new today.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. If I could throw out one thing.
Please.
There's these two words that the senators all hate, but you might be useful to you. It's called unfunded mandate. So we're going to be hearing that tomorrow, I think it is, or Monday. We acted towards school systems a lot last year. Just for instance, no cell phones in schools or cell phones at certain hours. And as a senators, we don't like this at all, but it's an open area. They're going to call that an unfunded mandate. Well, you've told us what we have to do, but you didn't give us any money to do it with. And that applies to the business and labor part too. So, somebody is bringing a bill to say that, all these things you guys, those are all great. We want more money now. We're either going to raise the mill levy and you're going to look back as you're raising property taxes. So either stop telling us what to do or give us the money to do it. But I'm giving you some ammunition here. You can push back on us and say, hey, you're telling us what to do. We want some money for it.
Okay.
I didn't say we're going to give it to you, but I'm just...
There you go. So we're all going to practice saying that term together. Ready? Unfunded mandate. Unfunded mandate. One more. Unfunded mandate. And then it will just roll off the tongue for you. Thank you for that.
I feel like that's what my kids do to me.
Oh,
Like
yes.
a lot of unfunded
This is an
mandates.
unfunded mandate.
Exactly.
Oh, that's Spectacular. All right. So we always like to close our podcast with a toast, and I will just let everyone in the audience, as well as Senator Sorrentino, know that you have a role to play in this. And the final words are cheers to HR. And when I give you the signal, that's your part of the toast. Okay? Here we go.
To the HR professionals who showed up today.
And to the public servants who opened their doors.
To shared purpose.
Shared responsibility.
Cheers to advocacy.
And cheers to HR. Cheers to HR. Go ahead.
Well, welcome to HR Wine Bar. I'm Jamie Mohrman.
And I'm Amy Luckenbill, and we are your co-hosts for HR Wine Bar. Thank you for joining us.